I recently saw this documentary called The Wanted 18. It's about Palestinians in the town of Beit Sahour in the West Bank during the First Intifada of the late 80s and early 90s. They refused to pay taxes and boycotted Israeli products, seeking to become self-sufficient and produce everything they needed themselves, including milk. That's where the cows come in. 18 of them, brought in by a collective of the town's residents. But the authorities really weren't thrilled about the cows.
And I quote the exact words. These cows are dangerous for the security of the state of Israel.
It's a great story, even if the movie's claymation is a little silly. And when I saw it, Frontier Developments had just released the Barnyard Animal Pack for its game Planet Zoo, which is one of my favorite games ever. And I had an idea. What if I built not an exact replica of Beit Sahour, but a little Beit Sahour inspired village in Planet Zoo? Just a little tribute to the Palestinian people, their history and resilience, especially as the Israeli assault on the Gaza Strip continues. So the first thing I want to do is get a height map of Beit Sahour. Unfortunately, the map doesn't say Palestine, but it's located in the West Bank, near Jerusalem, or Al-Quds, and right next to Bethlehem. And my first attempt to import a height map into Planet Zoo produced this. The terrain is a little harsh. I'd better go back to the drawing board and soften things up a little bit. And this is my second attempt. That terrain is still looking pretty rough, but I think I can work with it. I'll start by building a main road through the buildable part of this terrain. Then I'll switch the road to asphalt and modify its path a little. Note that I'm using the free build mod, which gives me some extra options in terms of object placement, path width, and here, brush size. We don't need the zoo entrance anymore, so we'll just get rid of it. Then I'll just go around and smooth out the edges so that our village blends in a little better with its surroundings. Here's what the terrain looks like now. And I've scouted out a few places where we might want to build. I think we'll start here. Now I need to choose my building materials, and traditional Palestinian houses are apparently built out of stone, so I need to choose one that can be recolored to match the surrounding earth and rocks. I ended up going with the stone mason work from the Tuwaiq pack. You can choose 3 different colors for the stones and another color for the grout in between. I added an arch over the door, and the classic European style window matches this pretty well. I want to get everything just the right color, although I'll eventually switch out this door for another one. But I think I need to make this house a little bit bigger. It seems traditional Palestinian houses are typically 2 stories high. That looks a little better. Let's give them some more windows. And I think this door is a better fit. I did a little research for this by looking at lots of pictures of Palestinian homes online, as well as making use of Google Maps and Google Street View. I also read some articles, including academic articles, like this one by Gabriel Tuwaiq. Published in the journal Jerusalem Quarterly, it describes how the symbol of the red pitched roof was alternately appropriated and reappropriated by Zionist colonizers and native Palestinians. It includes some pictures and this really helpful diagram, which categorizes things by time period and also into urban and rural. We can see that, until recently, rural Palestinian homes generally had flat roofs. So I'm going to give this one a flat concrete roof, which I can recolor in a minute to better match the stone. Although we will have to do something about it protruding through the walls like this. Now we'll just move this house back into position and add some stairs leading up to the front entrance. Now I'll add a wall alongside the stairs. It'll act as a kind of railing. Then I'll extend this wall all the way around the property. Although I'll have to raise the house up to do it because the ground level varies so much. And there we go. Now we'll just lower this back down, making sure we get it just right. The next step, if we want to add some animals, is to trace a null barrier all the way around where we want to keep them. And then we'll add a guest entrance gate right here. I don't know if we'll actually have the guests use it, but it looks cool. And we can imagine that they would take the animals out to graze in the field. Here's how it looks from the front. Now, if we want this to be a functioning habitat, we have to add a habitat gate for the staff. We can hide it behind this door. And we need a path leading down to the door. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of space in here. But as I mentioned before, the free build mod gives us a few extra options, including a narrower staff path. I'll then hide a keeper hut in here. And I'll place the other staff facilities on the road over here for now. Now, I think we're just about ready to start placing some animals, and I think we'll begin with some goats. So we'll go into the animal market and we'll pick up this one and maybe Remy too. Then I'll just move them into their new habitat. Oh, there's a problem. No path to destination. Actually, we haven't yet hired any staff to even move them. Let's start with a keeper. And a vet. Here's our first goat, Remy. Let's make the ground cover a little more hospitable for Remy. No, that's too much grass. Goats would benefit from a little shelter. I'll put it in this corner over here. And a water source. I'll put a tap in the wall here. With a little faucet. And then some enrichment items to keep the goats occupied. I'll place a Scots pine here for them to scratch themselves on, even though I don't think Scots pines grow in the area. It doesn't look too bad. And how about a watermelon feeder? So what does grow in the area? Well, I looked it up, and on top of Wikipedia, there was this article from 1918 describing the trees of Palestine. It was a big help. So here we have a little plant palette featuring the umbrella thorn acacia tree, the doom palm, the date palm. I don't think this is the right kind of oak, but whatever. We have poppies, of course, and the prickly pear cactus, which isn't native to the region, but I understand it's pretty popular here anyway. And of course, olive trees. The game has 4 different sizes. Okay, before I get to planting, just one more thing. Now let's get some shrubs in along the base of this wall. I'll use lots of these Nitraria retusa bushes. And we can put some poppies here. I'll just sink them into the ground a little bit. I think this is coming along nicely. Let's give them a car. And let's make it white. And we'll add a mysterious black car parked across the street. And some decals to make this wall look a little more weathered. We can also use decals along the edge of the road to help it blend in with the terrain. We've just got to get it the right color. And how about an old olive tree growing over this wall? The blackthorn bushes in this game kind of look like olive trees too, so maybe we can use a few more of those. One of our goats has an infectious disease, so I had to add a veterinary clinic and a quarantine. How about we get some chickens? Here comes the first one now. I want to add some enrichment items for the chickens, but I don't want to ruin the look of the habitat, so I'll just hide them in trees. Alright, I think we're done with our first house. Let's copy this and use it as a base for our second. We'll put it over here. I'll start by getting rid of this wall. I want to use something a little different, something that will conform to the shape of the terrain over here. I'll use the chain link fence. It's one of the default in-game habitat barriers. And here's what our second house looks like so far. So I was trying to decide whether I should have sheep here or maybe an olive grove. And then I started to wonder, could I do both? And I found multiple academic articles that actually suggest, yeah, that wouldn't be a terrible idea. I then started researching the optimal layout of an olive grove. And I found that In drier regions, and without any irrigation, about 8 meters apart would probably be best. So, to help me get the correct spacing, I made this using 4-meter long logs. And here's our little olive grove. That's not too bad. Now, let's go get some sheep. It's the Hill Radnor sheep we want. And here comes the vet with our first sheep. The mechanic doesn't seem to be in too much of a hurry though. And the vet seems to be stuck here. Is there something wrong with the path? I'll try rebuilding it and see if that helps. But our vet has finished their delivery and is in a hurry to get out of here. Here's our first sheep, Arizona. I think I'm going to have to work on the terrain though. There, that's starting to look a little better. Oh, Arizona has escaped. There she is. Should we go ahead and make the fence a little higher? Oh, we'll have to turn on free build for that. I actually don't like how that looks. It's just bugging me. So let's go back to the original height and just change our settings a little bit. We are in sandbox mode, so we can just go into the settings and disable animal escapes. But other settings like animal welfare and enrichment needs, we'll leave enabled, so we'll have to give our sheep some toys to play with. I'll hide this hanging grazer feeder inside an olive tree so that it looks like the rope is hanging from a branch. Wait a minute, how did you get out? Didn't I disable animal escapes? Yes, I did. And this hanging grazer feeder is just going berserk. Okay, so maybe Cities Skylines 2 isn't the only game with bugs in it. And have they all escaped? Meanwhile, back at the first house, we have babies. It's our first kids and chicks running around the yard. Okay, back to work on our second house. I'll plant some shrubbery along the fence here. Some more Nitraria retusa bushes. I'll also use some more blackthorn bushes and poppies. I think the sheep seem pretty happy grazing among the olive trees, and they've had babies too. Okay, I think this house is done. Time to get to work on the third. I think I'm going to make this one a little different. It'll be a little bigger, and the first floor, the walls of the first floor will be made out of concrete. I'll also change up the windows and give it a driveway. Back to Google Street View for some inspo. We are now in the hills in the outskirts of Beit Sahour. And there's lots of these stone walls surrounding people's yards. Some of them are in good shape, but others have seen better days. So I want to replicate that here. And I'll do it using these aquatic faux rocks. Yeah, I think that turned out all right. Before we go any further, I decided I needed to rename the staff and to rename them after kids who have lost their lives in Gaza. If any of these names are unfamiliar to you, take a minute now, go ahead and just Google their stories. So this third house will have a vegetable garden, but that's not quite so simple when the terrain isn't exactly suitable for that. So I have to lay down a bunch of these mulch pieces. And then I'll start planting. First, some carrots. I'll also plant some turnips and, of course, watermelon. I've just got to angle it so that it looks like it's actually growing from this vine here. I'll then add some tomatoes and some cauliflower and a few sprinklers. And we have a pretty decent looking garden. Now I want to build a kind of trellis for a grapevine. And here's the finished product. I decided to extend the mulch out a little further to give the garden a nice straight edge, but the terrain here is hilly, so that was tough. I then put a fence around the edge of the garden. I used the rustic wooden fence from the new Barnyard Animal Pack. I was thinking about keeping chickens in here, but I have to put a habitat gate in first. I then had my staff bring over some of the chicks from the first house we built. They just grow up so fast, don't they? There's actually a setting to disable animal aging. I may need to use that eventually. But first, some more plants around the edge of the garden. And everywhere else, too. I'm really happy with our little garden here. I love looking at it. And watching the chickens play in the sprinklers. We'll give this house a car too. Maybe a red one? No, let's make it white. Okay, it's time for one more house. Again, we'll start by copying this one and placing it over here. I'll give this house a full-size front porch. And one of those red pitched roofs I talked about earlier. I know they're not common on traditional rural Palestinian homes, but we'll say this house is a little more modern. Let's give them a back patio too. We can extend this old stone wall. I'll then add some plants, a couple of cars in the driveway, and we've got a pretty good looking house here. Maybe around back they'll cultivate some prickly pear cactus? Yeah, like that. Except this one's flying. Let's fix that. No flying. I'll also give them a little patio set. So I think 4 houses will be enough for now, but there is one more structure that we absolutely have to build, and that's the barn or stable where they hide the infamous 18 cows. And I thought about Jesus. Wasn't he born in a stable in neighboring Bethlehem? What did that look like? Well, the supposed birthplace of Jesus was apparently incorporated into the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. Here's what it looks like today, but this doesn't give us much of a sense of what it would have looked like back then. Then again, some theologians, like Ian Paul, suggest that Jesus wasn't actually born in a stable at all, and that the traditional Christmas story is based on a mistranslation. Quote, the actual design of Palestinian homes, even to the present day, makes sense of the whole story, Paul writes. Most families would live in a single-room house with a lower compartment for animals to be brought in at night, and either a room at the back for visitors or space on the roof. The family living area would usually have hollows in the ground filled with straw in the living area where the animals would feed. So Jesus would not have been born in a detached stable, but in the lower floor of a peasant house where the animals were kept. Nevertheless, Beit Sahour plays a role in that traditional Christmas story. The website of the Hirbawi Kafia factory explains, the name of the township, Beit Sahour, means the house of dawn and relates to the ancient shepherds of the town who would stay up until dawn to watch over their flock. Shepherds are a common theme with Beit Sahour. A stone's throw from the hilly town of Bethlehem, Christian tradition holds the valley to be the site of the shepherd's field, the place in biblical scripture where the angels shone in the sky and announced to a group of wandering shepherds that Jesus was born. So the shepherd's field in Beit Sahour, like the Church of the Nativity in nearby Bethlehem, is an important site of Christian pilgrimage and the home of a Greek Orthodox church. The Hirbawi website goes on to describe the role of Beit Sahour in the First Intifada. And of course it mentions the film The Wanted 18. Which is what brings us here. So the first thing I did is check the game Zoopedia to determine how much space we need for 18 cows. I then built a frame to those specifications and started looking for an appropriate spot that was flat enough. I used the rustic European stone walls and again a concrete roof. And I added a guest gate in case any visitors want to wander back here and check out the cows, but I don't know how many will. It's kind of hidden away, which is precisely the point. Anyway, I then added some custom windows that I made out of logs. And then I also used logs to create beams and pillars to support that large concrete roof. And I'll add some mesh over the windows to keep unwanted visitors out. Next, I'll pile up some hay bales at one end of the barn, although that looks a little too neat. There, that's better. Now, according to the movie, there was a young man who slept in here with the cows to hide from the occupying army that was looking for him. So, we'll leave a little blanket here for him. This one looks good. If we can get the colors just right, we can kind of get it to look like a traditional Palestinian keffiyeh, like the ones made by Hirbawi. Now it's time to get our cows. I don't think it's Highland cattle they had in Beit Sahour, but that's what we have in the game, so we'll just grab the first 18 females we can find. Gigi is an appropriate name. Here they come. Any minute now. Here we are, our first few cows. Of course, we have to rename 4 of them after the cows in the movie. So Darren becomes Rivka. Grace is now Ruth. Tony shall henceforth be known as Lola. And Danning? What kind of name is that for a cow? You're Goldie. So the purpose of these cows was to get milk. So let's set up a simple milking station. If I recall correctly, the doctors and engineers who were involved in getting these cows had a heck of a time trying to figure out how to milk one. We'll say this one got kicked over. And this is a new feature that was introduced to the game with the Barnyard Pack. With the addition of a hand sanitizer dispenser, guests can now roam the habitat freely and interact with the cows. Maybe not with Jessica, though. I better call a vet. Back in the game settings now, the only way to get guests in this zoo is to add guest spawners, and I want to put them inside of the houses, but there are also facilities inside of those houses, and typically those facilities negatively affect guest happiness, so I'll just turn that dynamic off. Now, where to put it? Not much room left in this house for a guest spawner. I'll try one of the bigger houses. Maybe in here? That's one. And another one in here. And I forgot to add a zoo entrance gate. I initially made these as staff paths, but that means that guests won't be able to leave the house, so let's change that. But despite changing the path type to something that the guests can actually walk on, some of them are immediately despawning, some of them are getting trapped, and some of them are able to actually use the path and enter the zoo. So I don't know what's going on. Now I'm worried we might have too many guests coming into our little village, so let's change the maximum number of guests. Although I wish we could make it less than 500. That's still a lot. I had to hire a couple more staff members to keep up with things, and again, if you don't know the story of any of these Palestinian children, please go ahead and look them up now. They, and possibly tens of thousands of other kids, have had their lives cut short in the last 9 months. The health ministry has essentially lost count given the conditions they're working in and the conditions they're all just trying to survive. Anyway, I think that's enough for today, but before we go, let's just plant a few more trees around the outskirts of town to make it a little more presentable. I'll leave you with a few closing shots, but please, if you've watched this far, why not give that like button a click and let me know what you think in the comments. Should I continue this build? Should I start a new zoo in franchise mode, or should I just go back to City Skylines 2? Anyway, thanks for watching. I'm Pylon John. Free Palestine.